let's dive into Apple a little bit. And I love this clip. This is like one of my favorite clips about any kind of technology company that's ever been recorded. So let's take a look at it.
Attention Mapple Universe. Prepare for a live announcement from Mapple founder and Chief Imaginative Officer, Steve Mobs.
Steve Mobs!
He's a genius! He's like a god who knows what we want!
Greetings, it is I, your insanely great leader, Steve Mobs. I'm speaking to you from Mapple headquarters deep below the sea with an announcement that will completely change the way you look at everything.
Ooh.
And that announcement is...
You're all losers! Huh? You think you're cool because you buy a $500 phone with a picture of a fruit on it? Well, guess what? They cost $8 to make, and I pee on every one. I have made a fortune off you chumps, and I've invested it all in Microsoft. Now my boyfriend Bill Gates and I kiss each other on a pile of your money.
Traitor! Your heart is blacker than your turtleneck!
Who dares question the boss we fired 10 years ago and then brought back?
It was my brother Bart.
Flay him with your earbuds! Flay him, I say!
So I certainly don't mean to make fun of Steve Jobs. I think Steve Jobs is amazing, and I don't really mean to make fun of Apple at all. But what I love about this video and or about this clip, and what I love about The Simpsons in general, and South Park too is a lot like this, is that they so totally put their finger on the issues, and they so totally find the kind of the kink in the armor, and they bring it out in a way that's just hilarious. So let me go over with you some of the things that I think that are in this clip that show that Apple is at the same time really, really different than these other companies that I've talked about, but at the same time just exactly the same, doing exactly the same thing. So one of the guys in the clip says, you know, we worship Steve Mobs. He knows what we want, you know, and that's it. That's the Apple mystique in a word. They know what we want. And the question I have for you, and this is a serious question to ask yourself of Apple products, is do they know what you want, or are they deciding for you what you want? And when they've decided for you what you want, you think it's what you want because they told you it's what you want. So I don't want to answer that question. I want to pose it. And I want to say that there's a kind of a kink in the Apple marketing regime, is this idea of they're gods, they know what we want. And so think about it. Consider it for yourself. And I don't have an answer to the question, but I do have the question, and I do want to raise that question. Okay, so it's also showing this idea of a cult, that Apple to some extent goes beyond the product and becomes a cult. And all the best products do this. The best products hit you at an emotional level that, you know, that's beyond reason. Think of all the things that you have that you love. You love them. It's a thing, but you love it. You love it like it was a person, like you want to marry it, right? I mean, it's just that it's that way. And Apple has been able to create a cult the way that none of these other organizations can create. And so they got their cash cow, right? They've been raking it in from their whatevers for a long, long time. But what never has happened is the early adopters have never quit them. The early adopters have never gone flying off to someone else, and Apple remains cool. Even Facebook is losing cool quick. Google totally is losing cool because it's, you know, into world domination. And so there's the kind of the twist in this clip that I love so much. Is Apple into world domination, or is Apple not into world domination? Is Apple exactly the same as these other guys, and it's a cult of personality and a cult of design that's making it so that the early adopters still think Apple's cool after all of these years? Or is it really cool? Or have they really found something? They've really found the formula that works. So the parts of this that I really, really love is Bart Simpson, the spoiler. He's always the kind of, you know, he's the bad boy behind the scenes, telling the truths, telling the things that other people, you know, won't say. And some of the things he says are just great. And they kind of boil down to is like, I'm still in it for the money, you know. This is still the same game of business. I'm still trying to make money for you. This is just a different way to make it. And in fact, and this is what he says in no uncertain terms, I'm no different than Bill Gates. there's always this huge rivalry between Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and and behind the scenes we're holding hands. We're laughing at you guys because we're all just making money. And I found one way to make money, and he found a different way to make money. He makes money by being, the default, by being what everybody has to have. And I make money by making people think they have to have me. And so they'll pay twice as much just for me. So we're laughing all the way to the bank. That's the Bart Simpson spoiler. And whether it's true or not, I don't even have to say that. What I just want to raise is that issue, that idea, that maybe Apple is no different, but they found a different way to make you think they're different. Apple, think different. Think differently about Apple than you would think about a company its size that's doing, the same thing that it wants to do, dominating markets. And if there's one thing that Apple is good at, it's dominating markets. The markets that Apple holds, they hold really, really tight. The iPhone market, although actually iPhone's starting to get cracked. iPhone is definitely starting to get cracked, but and now they don't have Steve guiding them anymore, so we'll see if they can recover from that and recapture that market. But certainly that's what they've done. They've captured those markets. Okay, so that's Apple. I really love Apple. I love Apple products, but I just love to make fun of them too because they're so serious about themselves and they're so serious about their designs. And anytime somebody's like that, they're just like, The Simpsons or South Park is going to do an episode on them and just like tear them to pieces. All right, so, I've kind of strongly worded a lot of the stuff that I've said in the last two slides, and I realize very well that it's a complicated world, that we're not run on single motives, that it's not all about profit, that there are really vision, and the vision remains in many of these companies, and those founders are not cynical necessarily. Like I've said, Steve Jobs might be cynical, or Bill Gates is cynical, or whatever. I don't know that if they're cynical or not. There's lots of motivations, and people are complicated. They're all playing the business game, no doubt about it. They are all playing the business game, but to what end are they playing the business game? In the end, are they benevolent or are they evil? That really is the question. That's the question that's on the table here. And like I say, like I never do, I'm never going to give you answers. I just want you to think really hard about it. I want you to think not simply they're evil or not simply they're good, but they're complicated. What parts of them are evil? What parts of them are good? What should we do about them? Right? There's other games besides the business game that plays. Microsoft, there's the Gates Foundation in Microsoft. Billions and billions of dollars, I think it's the largest private foundation in the world, funded by Bill, just chucking his money in there. So it's a complicated world. There is the business game, but there's lots of other games, and there's lots of other reasons why people do what they do, and it's not all cynical. I've given you a sort of a simplistic view of this, but it's not simple at all. There's lots going on. Okay, and finally, and I think that I forget the guy's name, the CEO of Schmitz, says that, who am I to say what's evil? Evil is different places in the world. And so, if we're going to be a global company, we have to pay attention to the morals all over the world, not just the morals of some people in America that are loud about it. And just because we happen to be based in America, guess what, world? Guess what, America? Apple's not an American company anymore. Google's not an American company anymore. Microsoft's not an American company. They're world companies. And these days, I bet you they're making lots more money outside the United States than they're making inside the United States. We'll come back to that in a minute. So the world is complicated. I presented it simply because I want to give you some ideas. I want to give you some points. But I want to encapsulate this by saying, anything that I said is far too simple. And you have to think a lot harder about it. And you have to talk to all your friends about it. And you have to come to a deeper and deeper understanding of this stuff. All right, so let's run through, and actually I want to pose this little question that's sitting on the slide here. And this is a really important question. What would you do? What will you do when you become really successful? How will you play this game in a way that you feel is better than it's been played before? What do you have to bring to the table? What solutions do you have? And so think really hard about that and become someone who has an opinion about that, someone who can play things out maybe differently than they've been played before. Okay. So I want to go through a couple of the really big conflicts. And the one that I think is really very germane to this class is the Google versus Microsoft conflict. And I want to show you how this is working. And I want to show you Google's methodical approach to unseating Microsoft. I've already talked about Android OS and its threat to the Microsoft OS. But I want to look at this from a much more subtle perspective. And I don't know if you know this, if you've known this before, but this is really what's happening. And in fact, I think you'll see in the video of the UX guy Dan from Google that he almost says this. He's there with this idea, and it's not a controversial idea. Google is trying to unseat Microsoft. So I have here on this slide a picture that kind of characterizes the Microsoft operating system, right? There's this little start menu, and all the programs are nicely organized on that start menu. And then there's a thing that you might have noticed not so long ago popping up on your screen here, and it's a little Google bar. Whenever you're on a Google property, like Gmail or Google Search or Google Plus, right? Google Docs, you get this little menu bar. Gee, kind of idea look familiar to you from a user interface perspective? Two different user interfaces for frankly the same thing. I got lots of applications that I could run. One's running off of Google in the cloud, right? That's Google's big thing. They're running in the cloud, meaning they're not on your desktop. Why aren't they on their desktop? Because Microsoft's on your desktop. That's a big thing, you know. Would Google not want you to download a desktop and become a Google application? In fact, there is the Google desktop, which is the bar right above that black bar, right? That's basically your Google desktop application. You download it, it becomes a Google toolbar. It runs in your browser because that's where they can be right now. But wouldn't they love that browser to just take over your whole screen and you never leave that browser and you just live inside of the Google apps? You pretty much could. You pretty much could live inside the Google apps. They got most everything. And why do they got most everything? Because they've been wanting to. They've been trying to get most everything. They've been trying to get all the things that make it so that you really never have to do anything but Google. It's the Google sphere, right? And they're in direct competition with the Microsoft operating system. What they would like you to do is open Windows, click on your browser, and what browser? Not Microsoft Internet Explorer, but Chrome, right? Their browser. And then Chrome becomes the operating system. Chrome becomes the biggest, highest level window, right? And forget that Microsoft's behind there. You don't even ever go to Microsoft anymore. You just go to Google. Can you see the competition? Can you see how Google is really trying to get they can't get underneath Microsoft. And that's what Microsoft has. That's their competitive advantage. Right now, at least, every computer, Microsoft's at the bottom. So run Google all you want. You're already paid for Microsoft, right? But Microsoft knows that how long are you going to continue paying for Microsoft if you never use it, if all you ever use is Google. And that's Google's strategy. Google's got a lot of cool things that Microsoft doesn't have. Google doesn't charge for anything because it's all advertising based. Have you ever seen an advertisement come up in Microsoft Windows? That ain't their model. Their model is selling product. Their model is selling bits, right? And they're certainly doing all they can to try and become a cloud company and compete with Google on an equal basis. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they start introducing ad revenue into their model just because they're scrambling to keep up with Google or whatever. But here's the competition. Google versus Microsoft. Who will be your operating system? Google's trying really hard to be that operating system, and Microsoft's trying really hard to stay in front. And both of them have the get under it strategy. Google wants to get under your entire web experience. And by the way, once they're under your entire web experience, get under your entire computer experience. Microsoft is already under your entire computer experience, and they've been beat up a lot for trying to be monopoly, right? That's what really toppled Microsoft from their high horse not so many years ago, was all the lawsuits that they were a monopoly, that they shipped with their own browser and they didn't ship with other people's browsers. Google, for some reason, is not slapped with a bunch of lawsuits. But you better believe if they ever actually took over for Microsoft, they'd get the same stuff. People would start to revolt against Google the same way they revolted against Microsoft, and in fact, they already are. All right, that's Google versus Microsoft. I love that one. And now here's Google versus Facebook. So let's see a little clip from this guy who talks about Google versus Facebook.
Well, I think Google is very worried about Facebook. For one thing, if Google's mandate is to organize and index all the world's information, it must concern them greatly that by far the largest repository of information on the internet, the fastest growing one, is generally opaque to their crawling tools. Because anything in Facebook that has any privacy protections on it at all, which is still, I think, well over half of all the data there, Google has no access to. So basically, Facebook is almost, in a sense, creating and producing an alternate internet that Google is shut out of. An irony there, though, by the way, is that the changes that Zuckerberg gets criticized for in regard to privacy, pushing people towards the everyone privacy setting, are exactly what Google would want to see happen. Because if everyone used the everyone privacy setting, then Google could search the data in Facebook. So that's an interesting irony. But Google doesn't like Facebook because of that. They don't like Facebook because it's a huge part of people's time, and a lot of searching is happening inside Facebook. I think Facebook is now the 4th largest search engine on the internet, just for searches in inside Facebook. You know, between what
YouTube's the number 2 as well.
Yeah, between what Microsoft's doing searching internet stuff from inside Facebook and what Facebook does searching Facebook stuff inside Facebook combined, I think that's the second largest search site in the fourth largest, sorry. And so plus they're competing for ad dollars. But you know, Google also targets through AdSense all around the internet in a way that Facebook is going to be able to do better, and that's going to be a problem. You know, social information is clearly going to benefit the search process. Facebook has the largest amount of social information by far. So I actually think, my own opinion, long term, is searching kind of goes away in some sense, or we use it a far smaller percentage of time as the internet and social graph stuff gets much more deeply embedded into everything and mobile devices, etc. I think more stuff's going to come at us when we want it and need it, because the systems will be there to identify our needs more rapidly and automatically or autonomically. Or not that we won't still search for things, but a lot of things that we kind of go through a fairly unwieldy process of searching for today, I think are going to be more right there for us. And Facebook's data could help make that happen. Now, Google might find a way to make that happen too.
Do you think, Google has tried social experiments. I used to be a reporter covering that during that time when they were experimenting. They haven't seemed to be able to crack the code.
Google has never shown it has any institutional DNA for social search, data for social anything. They are an algorithmic company. This is the point that Peter Thiel, and particularly Peter Thiel, but also Mark make in my book, that Google is the ultimate algorithmic computer science company,
Right.
but it has no understanding of people. It hasn't needed to. Facebook was started from an understanding of people from the beginning. Mark has an intuitive understanding of social needs. He's a psychology student as well as a computer scientist.
Right, I do love that where you talk about where Google, or where Peter Thiel says that the difference between Google and Facebook is that Google ultimately believes the world will be centered around machines, whereas Facebook's model has humans maintaining mastery over technology.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. I mean,
that's a controversial statement.
It's,
but
you know, the man versus machine. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so see the ideas, and what I really love about this clip is that so many of the ideas that we played with in this class are coming right back in, and now you can hear somebody say something that I bet you at the beginning of the class you really had no access to. You wouldn't know what this guy was talking about. With the concepts in this class now, you can totally understand what this guy's talking about, and you can party with his ideas. You can really say, oh, I totally get that. I see how this is going on. Well, first big idea is the hidden web, right? In fact, we even talked about this during one class session, that Google has no access to the large majority of Facebook. Facebook is behind the password wall. Right, a lot of it is, unless you make all your stuff public. It's behind the password wall, and so that password wall keeps Google out. And so Facebook would kind of like people to keep their privacy settings open, but on the other hand, the more private you make Facebook, the more they get to compete with Google. And in fact, as you hear this guy say, you know, so the search inside of Facebook is now the 4th largest search on the web. Right, people searching inside Facebook. Okay, point number 1. Point number 2, social search versus regular search. Exactly what our friend Greg from Facebook was talking about earlier on in the quarter. And that's the idea that social search, my searching along with my friends or my asking my friends for information rather than asking Google's for that information, is taken over and has an advantage. I'm not so sure. I wouldn't place it quite so slam dunk as social search rules over regular old search. But it's a point. Right, and it's a way that Facebook can easily compete with Google and try to unseat Google as the place people go for information. Why shouldn't they?